portions of this program have previously aired at an earlier date.
Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
Behind the Curtain with Jack Burkman.
Welcome to another edition of Behind the Curtain. My name is Jack Burkman. Remember, I'm not a talking head. I'm not a pundit. I'm a lobbyist. I walk the halls of Congress each and every day of the week. I go to parties. I go to events. I get information behind the scenes that nobody else in television can get or even knows is there. What a show we have this week. It's a shame we only have an hour. We'll be talking about how the hidden taxes imposed on you lose $15,000 a year from the terrible hidden taxes that you don't know about. Stay tuned to hear what those taxes are. We'll be talking about school shootings, how to make your schools safer. We'll be talking about this guy, Stephen Halper. Have you heard of him? The mole? Was there really an FBI mole? Greg Columbus will break it down for us. What a week. Don't miss any of this. But first up, Tom Schatz, frequent guest on this show, President, Council for Citizens Against Government Waste. Tom, welcome.
Thank you very much. Glad to be on.
All right, tell us about this hidden $15,000 tax. Our listeners and viewers are watching with bated breath. They don't know that the government is robbing them out of $15,000 a year.
Every year, the Competitive Enterprise Institute, our friends and one of the best organizations addressing overregulation and wasteful regulations in Washington and really in the whole country, releases 10,000 commandments. They report on the annual size and scope and cost of federal regulations, how they affect consumers, businesses, and the economy. It really shines a light on this hidden tax, as we all call it, of the American regulatory state. This year is 25 years for the report. It's really a great resource. And they point out that the regulations and intervention cost Americans $1.9 trillion in 2017, and that amounts to $15,000 per U.S. household each year. And by the way, it exceeds by just a little bit the $1.88 trillion that was collected in individual and corporate income taxes. So the regulatory burden is bigger than the tax burden.
So when you look at this 1.9, you're $2 trillion. Imagine if that could be added to the GDP. We could grow. You're talking about sending GDP growth from 3% a year to 4 or 5% a year just from getting rid of regulations. And that doesn't even include the good impact it would have on business in terms of freeing up business to do more things.
Well, that's one of the great reasons for the president's efforts to reduce the number of regulations. And he started out eliminating 2 for everyone. I think it's more like 8 to 1. And in terms of new regulations, of course, far fewer than under President Obama. And Congress approved 14 bills under the Congressional Review Act to eliminate Obama-era regulations. So a lot has been done. So it's not just the tax cuts that have helped improve the economy. It's the reduced regulatory burden. And then agencies each and every day are working really hard to pursue reasonable regulation. You shouldn't have zero regulations, but you should have reasonable regulations, and eliminating duplicative regulations, and also working more closely with the states and local governments to make sure those don't overlap.
So we really have a problem because even with all of Trump's fine efforts, and I agree with you, they've been great efforts by executive order to reduce the problem of burden of regulation. This year, I'm reading, even in 2017, 3,281 new rules and regs issued by federal agencies, even with Trump's great help. Tell us about that.
They still have to do those things, and a lot of that is to implement the laws that Congress has passed. So, the Congress enacts the laws, and then the agencies issue regulations for those laws. It would be helpful if Congress would provide more specific laws, and therefore there might also be fewer regulations. But a lot of times,
but Congress is lazy.
Here's the guidance.
Congress is lazy.
Right, and then they get upset when they do it wrong. Or when they duplicate, because there's so much overlapping jurisdiction on Capitol Hill, which I know that you're aware of, because there are so many subcommittees that do the same thing as the other subcommittees. They all want their own jurisdiction, their own fiefdom, their own, campaign contributions, so it's really hard to give up that power. And that's a cause of the overregulation as well. Republicans and Democrats both. Let's make that clear.
Alexander Hamilton, Tom, said it best. He said in the New York Colonial Legislature 250 years ago, Everything's been said, but not everybody's had a chance to say it. So it is. So it is in the world of Congress and duplication today, 2.5 centuries later. Now, Trump's doing everything he can on the surface that a good conservative would do, and we want him to do. But to go deeper, to really solve this problem, you would have to be willing to have budget shutdowns and constitutional issues, because you would have to step in and fire people that Congress might say and the Democrats might say, you can't fire him, he's civil service, we have to change the law in order for you to fire him. Trump could throw him out of the building, and then you have a legal crisis, right?
Right. Interesting. I know the president is proposing new civil service regulations and efforts to streamline the bureaucracy, which I think was last proposed by Jimmy Carter, and he kind of got laughed out of Washington. But they'll take this president more seriously. And I think whatever they're doing, because everybody basically gets an automatic pay raise right now. They do have the VA Accountability Act. The Secretary of Veterans Affairs has more authority to fire and discipline workers. They're using that as a model. So that will also help, of course, to reduce the number and the scope of these regulations when there are fewer people to write them and implement them. And again, we're not saying give everything up. We're not saying the government doesn't have a role in safety and security and the environment and everything else, but just don't overdo it. Make sure that they're effective and cost-effective. And one of the other ways to do it is for Congress to pass the REINS Act, which would give Congress the authority to overrule any regulation that has a value of more than $100 million. Again, another way to help control what goes on in the bureaucracy. Well,
they should. The REINS Act, that's something that should get through. Well, our friend Paul Ryan, I'm sure he's too lazy to do that in a year like this. Well, you know, I always tell the story of my friend. We'll call him Bill. I'll let him remain. We'll just call him Bill. He's an administrative law judge at the Department of Labor. And I think he works about one day a week for something like $185,000 a year. He views it like interest income. I think he's barely aware. He's gotten the direct deposit for so many years, and he does other things on the side. I think he's barely aware of where the direct deposit comes from, and he gets annoyed when he has to go in there one day a week. I mean, I think there are lots of people like this. When you have this nonsense flex time, there are people showing up. You never give flex time to federal workers because they'll be cut from a 3-day week down to a 1-day week. I think that's happening with a lot of people.
Not only that, there's, of course, early retirement, better pensions, better benefits. I worked on Capitol Hill for 6 years, a long time ago. Look, at least they did change the civil service retirement system to federal employees' retirement, so it's a contribution versus a benefit that they get whether or not they contribute, so they have a better retirement plan. Actually, their retirement plan is better funded than most states, but that's a different story. They still make more money. They still can't get fired for the most part. And again, the only change that's been made is this VA Accountability Act. And look how horrible they had to be in order for Congress to step in and say, what do you mean you can't fire the head of that Phoenix VA hospital? You have to be able to do that. They had to literally change the law. So hopefully they'll do more of that. And that's something that would really help in terms of the number and scope of these ridiculous and lengthy and intrusive regulations.
See, while people focus on the swamp and lobbyists, and that's important, I think the real evil is the bureaucracy, which has its own growth dynamic, as you point out. This thing grows like cancer. It's like a malignant cells reproducing no matter what president, no matter what party is in power. The malignancy will reproduce itself like bacteria.
Well, the president did impose a hiring freeze. There are fewer employees than there were under the Obama administration. Then, of course, you've got the Department of Defense, where you have more civilians, I think, than military, and that needs to change as well. But there are some changes coming along in the National Defense Authorization Act under Chairman Thornberry in the House that will help address what he calls the Fourth Estate, and that's another problem, of course, over there. So there are steps being taken. It's not totally hopeless. It's a huge effort. And I think this administration is doing more and trying to do more, certainly than Obama. Of course, that's not that hard a comparison. But really, I think more than a lot of administrations in the past 30 years.
I think the damage done in this area by Obama is something we can't even calculate now, and we may not even know the full extent of the damage for decades to come. Tom Schatz, thank you so much. President, Council for Citizens Against Government Waste. Well, coming up next, we'll talk about how to make the schools safer. Stay tuned.
Portions of this program have previously aired at an earlier date.
All the stories and controversies that no one talks about, but everyone should know about.
Some people without brains do an awful lot of talking.
Behind the Curtain with Jack Burkman.
Coming up next, we'll be talking about how the low population, more on population, kind of a continuing theme here on Behind the Curtain, how our low population hurts our economy and hurts America's leadership in the world. Stay tuned. Not enough babies in this country. Don't miss it. That's coming up next. Remember, if you want to take something behind the curtain, you call us 703-795-5364. 703-795-5364. Operators are standing by 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturday, all times Eastern Standard Time. Taking your emails now, jackberkman2016 at Gmail. Coming into the 20th century at least, but never the 21st. We're joined now by Teresa Payton, CEO of Fortalice Solutions, for a topic I love, and it's a dangerous topic. And all you libertarians out there, you really want to wake up. If I haven't got you awake, I want everybody up and awake for this one. If you're a libertarian, you want to hear this segment. Basically, what's going on are a lot of these drug companies like GlaxoSmithKline and others, many others, are selling the DNA data they have on you. Like if you're in the doctor's office, medical situation, you give up blood, DNA data. This stuff ends up in the hands of drug companies. They are selling it for various research purposes, commercial purposes, and they are making money off your DNA. Teresa, welcome.
Thank you for having me on today.
Well, this sounds pretty egregious. What's happening here?
Well, and this is one of those things where I think we've all realized that when we use free services such as free email, free social media, we realize we're the product for sale. We get targeted ads. We get upset when we hear our data is sold about us without it being anonymized. But for the most part, we kind of shrug our shoulders and say, yeah, I know I'm the product. But in this particular case, many people paid for a service. And so 23andMe, Ancestry.com, GED Match, all of these different DNA services which talk about understand what diet you should be on if you want to lose weight, understand what your future health issues might be.
All right, so 23andMe, okay, a lot of good stuff here. 23andMe is a genetics testing company. Now, they've partnered with GlaxoSmithKline, with GSK. So GSK had the data, and essentially they are selling it to 23andMe, correct?
23andMe is selling your data now to Big Pharma.
It's the other way around. So how does 23andMe get my data?
Well, you buy a kit and you send it away to them to find your long-lost ancestors or to get the diet that's right for you or to learn about your health. And when you do that, you have an opportunity to opt into different sharing options. And one of the more benign-sounding data sharing options says, are you willing to share this with the Genome Project? And I think most people would say, well, gosh, if my DNA can help end a heart disease, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So is this the real hidden subtext? Is this the real purpose of sites like Ancestry.com? Are they essentially, is that why they really exist? Is that how they really make money? It's a front for the drug companies? Is that what's going on?
I want to believe that they started off with truly wanting to provide ancestry services and then found this opportunity to help move things along with genealogy searches. If you and I don't really know our great-grandmom's name or it was misspelled at Ellis Island or whatever it is, we often hit these dead ends. And if you can add to a genealogy search DNA matching, that can help. But we're now in this really strange period where the technology can offer amazing things. It can solve murder cases. It can be sold to Big Pharma, your DNA, to create tomorrow's next cure for something.
Now, what does Big Pharma, when GSK gets this, what do they do with it?
Right, so they could work with, a Glaxo, they could work with, any of the kind of the big drug companies and say, hey, we've got the genetic makeup of somebody whose ancestors are from these parts of the world. These parts of the world are known to have cancer or this type of heart disease or sickle cell anemia or whatever it is. And here you go. You can have their DNA and you can do all kinds of testing against that DNA to develop the next miracle cure drug. So it helps them basically speed up the cycle for R&D at the pharmaceutical companies.
Now, all of this is essentially going on unregulated. I mean, see, I have this theory that government does most of the things. Government does everything it shouldn't do and nothing it should do. Shouldn't there be regulation like this? It doesn't seem like there's any. I mean, the FTC is investigating, but nobody has any real regulation to stop this or regulate it.
Not really. And so the FTC, you said that, right, they are investigating. And here's the thing. You know, there's kind of this law all of us in the United States know called HIPAA. And so, like, if you have a family member who's really ill and you show up at the hospital and you say, doctor, tell me what's going on. And they say, well, unless they filled out a HIPAA patient sharing form, I can't tell you anything. And so you would think that your My DNA would fall under HIPAA. Clearly, there's some workarounds going on there. And again, you know, we're sort of in this space of just because we can doesn't mean we should. And, you know, I don't know if you followed the Golden State Killer. He's behind bars. And you know how they finally figured out who they
No,
thought
tell us. I forget.
was,
Tell
right?
us.
Okay, so they were not kind of coming up empty. DNA was left at one of the murder scenes. I mean, these are heinous crimes. And so I'm so glad that the law enforcement was very clever and very creative. But what they did was they took the DNA from the crime scene, they ran it through GED match, didn't get an exact match, but got the most likely relatives. And then, based on investigations I have worked on in the past, I'm going to assume what they did next was they matched them up to property records. They matched those potential relatives up to birth records, and through process of elimination found somebody who was not in the GED match registry that maybe could have been their man. And they went ahead and arrested the individual. He has since admitted to these heinous crimes, and I hope it brings the victims' families some peace of mind that, you know, it doesn't bring their loved ones back.
So, in other words, how do you see this? So kind of back to the original topic. When you have companies like 23andMe, genetic testing companies, selling to Big Pharma, GSK, and others, and not just 23andMe, probably many companies, small companies like that get this stuff and sell it because they got it from Ancestry.com and wherever. I'm seeing the dangers in this. It sounds like you see a mixed situation where you have both pluses and minuses. Would you yourself, does Teresa Payton call for higher regulation of this?
Regulation to me sometimes is well-intended, but in practice is really awful, right? So you create this whole regulatory body, you create a ton of expenses, you have regulators come out who don't really know what they're looking for because it's an emerging issue, and it could also stifle innovation and creativity of the next DNA collection company. But I do agree with you. I would love to see more oversight. And I do believe, like, for example, if your listeners, if this concerns them, which it should, if they spoke up to FTC.gov and their online form and said, this is not okay, I want to hear what are the data collection practices? What are the data security practices? Do you anonymize the data before you sell it?
One more. Do we want to issue a warning? Only about a minute left. Do we want to issue a warning to consumers to not check that box on sites like Ancestry.com? Do we want to go ahead now and urge them not to do that?
Until we get the proper oversight and understanding, do not share. At some point, it will be incredibly beneficial to the greater good, but we do not have an understanding, which means your privacy and security could be at risk.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're telling you here, our expert is telling you, I'm joining in that call. Be careful the boxes you check on Ancestry.com and sites like that, because it can be very dangerous to you, with Big Brother knowing more and more and more about you and your family. Teresa Payton, thank you so much. If we're real lucky, we'll have you back again. Teresa Payton, ladies and gentlemen, CEO of Fortalice Solutions. We'll be right back.
Portions of this program have previously aired at an earlier date.
This is a universe where everything is depicted as a Washington Post political cartoon.
Behind the Curtain with Jack Burkman.
Welcome back. Remember, if you want to take it behind the curtain, you call us, 703-795-5364, 703-795-5364. Operators are standing by, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday. 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturday, all times, Eastern Standard Time. Same number. And also email jackburkman2016 at Gmail, jackburkman2016 at Gmail. If you know anything about the Seth Rich murder mystery, we will never quit on the Rich family, the city of Washington, and this country. We will solve the murder of Seth, and more coming very soon. Joining us now, Jim Andel, frequent contributor to this show and star reporter for the Washington Examiner. Jim, welcome back.
Hey, how are you?
Well, we're talking on segment 3 here about the masterful way in which Trump uses immigration. And he does what he always does. He pivots, he changes the subject, and now we seem to be back to that 16 campaign just in time for the 18 campaign. You might remember in 16, he effectively used the Nixon, what I call the Nixon 68 law and order campaign. Now he's focused on murders caused by illegal aliens. What say you?
Right. I think what he's definitely trying to do is depict the Democrats as being weak on immigration and weak on law and order and crime more generally. And through those issues, he hopes to rally the Republican base to show up at the polls in November. I mean, midterm elections really do depend a lot on whose base voters are engaged and energized and willing to turn out. And it's pretty clear that the Democrats are relatively fired up. They're pretty enthused about getting to go and vote against Trump and vote against Republicans. So the challenge that Trump faces is, can he get his own people, both regular rank-and-file Republicans and the disproportionately blue-collar but sort of Trump fans who don't normally show up for the midterms and vote Republican, people who didn't maybe show up and vote for Mitt Romney in 2012. Can he get some of those people to show up and vote when he himself is not on the ballot?
Now, Trump has skillfully, like if you talk about immigration and law enforcement and the murders and all of that, if you can't talk about it consistently, Trump kind of left this issue after the 16 campaign and is only bringing it up now in election season, which may be smart. In between, he has focused on the economy. Had he continued to talk about this immigration theme and all the crimes of illegal aliens, had he done this for the last 18 months, it might have been blasé by now. But I think what he's doing in bringing it up right now at the end of August is strategically wise. Do you agree?
Well, I think there was also just he had trouble getting any legislation on this issue passed through Congress. I mean, they've gotten some modest amounts of money for the border wall, but not really anything close to what they need to really fulfill Trump's campaign promise. I think Trump tried to challenge Congress to pass something on DACA in exchange for some legal immigration reforms and some border security money. And while it got close a couple times, the talks always seemed to fall apart. And so there are a number of immigration-related issues where, they did some things through executive action, and even just Trump's reputation had an initial impact on illegal entries. But, I think he's bringing it up now, both because it's a campaign issue that motivates his base, and I think also you're seeing Democrats, going to the other extreme on the issue when they're talking about things like abolishing ICE, and really seeming as if they don't support necessarily any kind of effective interior enforcement of immigration laws, maybe using immigration laws occasionally to get somebody out of the country who's guilty of other things, but they don't really seem to want to enforce those laws in the interior per se, and Trump is highlighting that at this point.
So it's interesting. The other advantage of this issue is it kind of draws attention away from Trump's failure to fund the wall, which you point out. Right. That's a potential liability with his base, but he shifts the focus to this, so it kind of serves the dual purpose. Going back to the wall for a minute on immigration, do you think that Trump will fight over the wall with the budget bill this fall? How intense a fight do you think we'll see?
I definitely think he's going to fight. I think he's running out of opportunities to really fund it, assuming that the midterms go, more or less well for the Democrats. It's going to be tough for him to have a better shot at funding it, in the first term at least, assuming that there's a second, if he doesn't get it done while he's got the House still. So I think there's going to be some degree of fight. The question is, will he listen to people both on Capitol Hill and inside the White House who are going to tell him
is
that
it wise
a government shutdown will be really bad before the election?
Are you sure about that? Are you sure about that? Maybe that's exactly what he needs, particularly if we think the election is going against Republicans?
Well, I'm not necessarily sure how it would play, but I know that that's the advice that he's going to get, is that it would play badly. In many cases, these shutdowns have been blamed on Republicans. Earlier this year, I think they won some shutdown fights over immigration, so that might embolden Trump to try it. You had these red state Democrats in the Senate kind of back down then, and maybe they back down this time.
It's a hard one. In the age of thinking about Ryan and Obama and Boehner and Obama, of course, we Republicans lost all of the shutdown showdowns, but I'm not sure how it would play now. I'm just thinking about how this goes. It might go differently. I guess we lose swing voters. We would lose some swing voters, but we might pick up an awful lot of base voters from doing something like that, which we couldn't before because we really didn't have a leader. With Ryan and Boehner at the head of the party, you really couldn't pick up many base voters because there wasn't any excitement. So with a shutdown, all you did was essentially lose swing voters, right? But now, is it different?
Right. Yeah, there's that certainly, you did lose the swing voters. There's also the fact that the media coverage should be so unrelentingly hostile in the event that something like that happened. And I think, the wild card here is that Trump has been more effective in pushing back at some of that, at least with the base, than prior Republican leaders have been. So that might be something that alters the picture a little bit.
Media coverage has reached the point where it already is unrelentingly hostile and never stopping, right? It's in the middle of August, and it's still unrelentingly hostile with Cohen and Manafort, and obviously that will continue after Labor Day. Maybe Trump has just completely written off. Maybe the White House has written off the establishment media and doesn't even try to influence that cycle anymore.
Well, they may not try to influence the cycle, but they certainly try to use it to their advantage. So they definitely want to counterpunch when they see particular stories circulating, like the person who is detained by ICE, who the initial viral stories were about how he was taking his pregnant wife to the hospital. Later came out that he was wanted for murder in Mexico. So a lot of Trump allies really highlighted that fact. So I think he still has, even if he's not necessarily relying on the media to get his message out, I think he still has a sort of symbiotic relationship with the media where, he needs them to sort of fire up his base and point out to things that are going on in the media he doesn't like, and the media really needs him to gin up outrage and ratings.
Let me ask you this. It would seem to me on the immigration issue, the president, about a couple minutes remaining in the segment, the president has the numbers on his side. I'm looking at numbers since 2001, since 9/11, 63,000 American citizens have been killed by illegal aliens. That's essentially 8-1 because illegal aliens only make up about 3% of the population. They disproportionately do a lot more killing by anyone's numbers. It would seem to me the numbers are on the president's side.
Well, and Trump has done more to highlight the victims of illegal immigrant crime than I think any major Republican leader has ever done. I think, you have one side, the Democrats and some of the John McCain wing of the party that really emphasize immigrant success stories, the high school valedictorian and the store owner and the entrepreneur, and those, are all true and fair enough. Trump has pointed to some of the negative, the cost side of the ledger, to a far greater degree than I think we've ever seen in recent years.
Jim Mantle, Washington Examiner, talking all about immigration. Jim, if we're real lucky, we'll be able to have you back again. Thanks so much. Well, coming up next, our friend Democratic pollster Pat Caddell joins us to talk all about the success of black entrepreneurs in the age of Trump. Wait till you hear about all the success for African Americans. Stay tuned. Hey guys, I'm right here in the Behind the Curtain studio. I want to talk to you about MyPillow. I had trouble sleeping for so many years, for 30 years, until I met my friends at MyPillow. These pillows are made with 100% cotton. They're machine washable and dryable. Best of all, they're made in the USA and backed by a 10-year warranty. Right now, you can get the MyPillow 4-pack and enjoy 50% off. 50% off. That's 2 premium pillows and 2 Go Anywhere pillows. You heard that right, for 50% off. But you have to act fast, and you have to act now to get yours and enjoy 4 MyPillows for a night's rest. How do you do it? You visit mypillow.com, or you call 1-800-923-8919, 1-800-923-8919, and use promo code Burkman.
Portions of this program have previously aired at an earlier date.
This is a universe where everything is depicted as a Washington Post political cartoon.
Behind the Curtain with Jack Burkman.
Welcome back. Remember, if you want to take it behind the curtain, you call us 703-795-5364, 703-795-5364. Operators standing by 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturday. Jack Burkman 2016 at Gmail, taking your emails. Same number, same email. If you know anything about the Seth Rich murder mystery, once again, 703-795-5364. Joining us now, Ilya Shapiro, Senior Fellow, Constitutional Studies at the Cato Institute and Editor-in-Chief of the Cato Supreme Court Review. Ilya, welcome.
Good to be on.
Well, we got to talk. One of these days, I got so many questions on the Supreme Court for you. But today, we're talking about the war against Alex Jones. My take on this is ultimately it will make him a lot more famous. You know, it's almost like the House of Cards scenario that he created for himself to make his content ever more in demand. So I see a short-term problem, but a long-term gain. What do you think?
Yeah, this is what's known as the Barbara Streisand effect, that I think in the 70s she tried to sue somebody and made them a lot more famous and made the criticisms of her a lot more famous than they otherwise would be. And so this indeed may well backfire, as you described.
What do you think? Tell us exactly what's going on. So in other words, it seems now that just about all of Silicon Valley has banned, I want to get a handle on the facts, everybody's banned him. Twitter, iTunes, YouTube, Facebook. Is he pretty much now banned from any social media? I mean, is there anything left? Amazon doesn't want to sell his products. I mean, am I accurate? Is this accurate?
He might still be able to have a Friendster or MySpace account or something like that. But, it's kind of odd that they all acted on the same day. There might be some antitrust issues there. But, yeah, basically, he apparently has been banned from all of these major media platforms. Now,
what exactly is his crime? What crime in the eyes of Mark Zuckerberg did Alex commit?
Well, before we get into this, let's just make clear, first of all, these are all private businesses, so they can have whatever policies they want. When we're talking about the First Amendment, that means government restrictions of various kinds. But that doesn't mean that necessarily what they're doing is right or a good thing. That's a separate question. And what he's been, I guess the reason he's been deplatformed, as it's been called, is because they say that he's been spreading hate speech and other violations of their terms of use.
What kind of hate? Can we get an example of this quote unquote hate? Does anything come to mind? What kind of hate are we talking about?
I think the most specific thing that they're pointing to is where he's talking about the families of the victims of the Sandy Hook shooting, the elementary school in Connecticut a number of years ago, where he's propagated some conspiracy theory or skepticism about whether this was a real thing.
Well, in any case, so why does Facebook care what his opinion of the Sandy Hook shooting? If he believes that there was somebody behind it or he has another theory, I don't see what that has to do with Facebook and its policies. Who would care? I mean, what does
it's really unclear. It's not like they're pointing specifically to a policy violation, or if they are, they're certainly not applying it evenly. There's lots of different types of groups or individuals that might be doing things that are look bad or otherwise antisocial or hate speech or who knows what. The bigger issue here is precisely what kind of standard they're applying. David French, who's a writer for National Review and a very good lawyer who's defending the First Amendment and things like this, had an op-ed in the New York Times, and it's amazing that the New York Times would publish him, basically saying that the standard should be defamation. The standard should be speech that the First Amendment does not protect. not as a legal standard. Again, these companies can set whatever policy they want. But that would be kind of a good thing for them to have, so they wouldn't face all of these responses.
Well, David, of course,
are being banned.
We've had him here as a guest many times. David, of course, is exactly right. But isn't this all just about raw politics, Ilya? Isn't this just a group of liberal organizations in Silicon Valley that are joining together in an effort to crush a conservative? Isn't that what's going on here?
That's a lot of what's going on here, and they're trying hard to be even-handed and to delineate just simple conservatives rather than quote unquote hate speech. But they're failing at it because it seems like they're not hiring the people that can understand what conservative or anything kind of to the right of Hillary Clinton, really, center right, what that is all about, and they're really struggling with that.
See, the real problem here is that we don't have a conservative version of Facebook. Like, why aren't we conservatives players in Silicon Valley? Why don't we have a conservative Facebook, a conservative Twitter, a conservative iTunes, a conservative YouTube? We're always caught divided. They're always organized. I want to create our own entities. Doesn't that solve the problem?
Well, I think that's not really healthy for our country to have just people talking to each other in their own echo chambers. But your first question is right. Why is it that Silicon Valley is so dominated? Not just dominated,
but they're doing it. I agree with you. It's not healthy, but they're causing this. They're making it partisan, not us. They're making it. They fired the first shot. We didn't.
Well, sure. I mean, we have with respect to the social media platforms, they're absolutely controlled by people on the left. I don't want to regulate them. Some conservatives even are saying, well, that means the government needs to step in and regulate them as if they were a public utility, like the electricity company or something like that. I don't think that's the right response. You definitely don't want government calling the shots anymore. That's even worse than having Mark Zuckerberg do it. But I think a lot of these platforms are gradually losing their cachet as people lose and as people can't trust them. And so it's fine for sharing videos of your babies or your cats or what have you, but not for political discourse.
So how will the system evolve if, as you say, and I think that's a good thing, if it might be too late for us to form our own Facebook, if Facebook and Twitter lose their cachet, where else can this kind of dialogue take place? Is there another outlet where this could go? Where do things go?
I'm a simple constitutional lawyer. If I was able to predict market trends like this, I'd be a stock market investor, a day trader, or something like this. It's hard to predict because a lot of it is just spontaneous order, as Friedrich Hayek would put it. That is, people acting for their own self-interest, as Adam Smith would have it, and creating networks that work for them. Talk radio, this medium that we're on now, that is more of a conservative medium. Why is it? It's not like conservatives as a whole decided to take over talk radio, but that's just how things evolved. So I don't think Facebook and Twitter are going to be the dominant media or social media platforms 10 or 20 years from now, and we don't know which direction it's going to go.
Let's talk about Alex Jones. So if you're Alex Jones right now, what should you be doing? What strategy for our friend Alex? How do you play this?
Well, I hope that he's hired a crisis PR firm to try to use some jujitsu on this, and whether it means accessing email lists or whatever his network of contact is, to use text messages or just going on TV in various ways. Social media is not the be-all and end-all of all of this. He's still got cases in court. He's being sued. He himself is suing people. So, I don't want to speak for him, but there are certainly ways that PR professionals fight back against these types of
Now, I guess the real strategic question for Alex Jones is, do you want to make this crisis better or do you want to make it worse? Maybe you want to make yourself more and more famous. Maybe you want to suck all these entities in. Maybe you want to be banned by every media outlet in the world. And maybe along the way, you become the most famous man in the world. Is that a plausible strategy for Alex Jones?
That's certainly a possible thing, because remember, whether it's Alex Jones or any media personality or impresario, their interest isn't solely to get out information or produce alternative viewpoints. They want to make money, they do want to have fame, and all these other personal goals. So some of that might be good for Alex Jones personally, but not necessarily good for liberty or conservatives or whoever he wants to ostensibly advance.
Now, let me ask you this. These bans do not just apply to Alex Jones. They're starting to apply to more and more conservatives. For instance, come to my attention, congressional candidate Elizabeth Heng, who is I don't know if you've heard of her case. She is a Republican candidate. She had a campaign video taken down because it showed the Cambodian massacre. I've seen that. I don't think it's even remotely gruesome. I mean, if we're going to take that down, do we shut down the Holocaust Museum? I didn't find her video to be even... I don't understand. I mean, isn't that just raw politics? Are you familiar with this Elizabeth Heng situation?
Yeah, I've heard about this. I mean, what about a promo for The Killing Field, the Academy Award-winning movie about the Cambodia massacre? Right. These algorithms, these bots that they have judging these things simply aren't working. And after the 2016 election, and Facebook and others, social media were criticized for allowing so-called fake news to get through, and then they've started reclassifying ads as political or hate speech or what have you, and applying them in different ways, and that simply has not worked. And there definitely has been an anti-conservative bias, but there's just been an anti-common sense bias as well.
One way to defeat Facebook might be for conservatives to encourage the whole country to rise up and everybody start putting offensive videos on Facebook and let Facebook ban millions of people. That might be the way to crush Facebook. Maybe have the whole country rise up and put on things that are, quote, offensive.
Well, I mean, as people hear about these examples, it doesn't make Silicon Valley look good, and so the political actors or politicians that they're supporting don't look good as well. So this can only redound ultimately to the candidates that Facebook disfavors.
Ilya Shapiro, Senior Fellow in Constitutional Studies at the Cato Institute, Editor-in-Chief of the Cato Supreme Court Review. Thanks so much. Remember, if you want to take it behind the curtain, if you have an issue you need to bring to Congress and your local press won't deal with it, you take it to behind the curtain. You call us 703-795-5364, 703-795-5364. Taking your emails, jackberkman2016 at Gmail. Remember, even when we're not on the air, you can hear us, see us, and read all about us at jackberkmanradio.com. And, of course, always in radioamerica.com. Thanks. We'll see you next week.